My son Colin and I have packed up the car and are planning to visit some of Central Oregon's geological oddities. We're now on National Forest roads headed east from the tiny Central Oregon town of Crescent, where we topped up the gas tank and stopped at the ranger station for maps and to review our plans with the ranger. I can't recommend this enough before heading into the wilderness, as the rangers are friendly and helpful and often can share local knowledge of roads to avoid or cool sites you might not know to visit. And I always like to double check the status of campfire restrictions. Our first destination is Fort Rock. The road leading out of the National Forest and down towards Fort Rock isn't quite on par with Monument Valley, but this is a pretty cool and unusual scene for Oregon. Fort Rock itself is remarkable to see, towering above the otherwise flat desert, similar in height to a 20-story building at its tallest point. It's visible from miles around and was used as a navigation landmark by wagon travelers back when, well, people traveled by wagon. This is a state park surrounded by private land, and there's no fee to visit. You just park and are free to roam, hike inside, wander around outside, and scramble up to explore the surreal rocky rim. Now we're headed to the Fort Rock Homestead Museum, just a few minutes up the road. This isn't your average roadside attraction. It's easily worth the $5 to stroll around this weather-beaten collection of humble historic buildings standing amid the sagebrush, with Fort Rock looming in the background. You can poke around inside the assortment of homes, a blacksmith shop, a general store, schoolhouse, and other buildings, which are all authentically furnished. With this desolate scenery visible through the windows, it gives you a nice flavor of frontier living. From here, it's not far to our next stop, Hole in the Ground. We found ourselves back in the sparse ponderosa forest. The fine, silty ash road is soft and pleasant to drive. Hole in the Ground is really not far from Fort Rock, maybe about 8 miles as the crow flies, though it's taken us about half an hour to work our way along the dirt roads and up towards the rim. Take a look at this. All the photos and videos I've seen online still did not prepare me for how amazing a mile-wide hole in the ground looks in real life. You really have to come and take a look at this yourself. This road goes all the way around the rim, and if I'm doing my math right, let's see, pi times diameter, so a circle of a little over 3 miles, I guess. It's a fun little drive through trees and boulders, with a mostly continuous view of the crater. here's Hole in the Ground from the East Rim. We pan across. There's Fort Rock. Well, of course, we're going to drive down into it. This roller coaster of a road is totally cracking us up.
Boing.
I've never seen anything quite like this.
Boing. Boing.
Even Lucy would like this one.
This is some Mario Kart level.
While you could easily imagine this to be the result of some massive meteorite impact, Hole in the Ground is actually a volcanic Mar crater, which apparently is formed by an explosion of steam from groundwater coming in contact with hot lava. It's time for us to start looking for some place to camp. Hole in the Ground is on National Forest land, and we could camp right down inside there, but we both agree it feels a little weirdly exposed, so we've decided to drive back through some of that ponderosa forest and find a spot for the night. We quickly discover we have a choice between trees and grass, or trees and grass, or, to really mix it up, trees and grass. So we found a little spot to camp out in the trees, sort of southwest of Hole in the Ground. Just went up a little unused side road till we found a nice spot. Since my little camp kitchen includes just a single burner stove, I try to keep meals as simple and efficient as possible. Often when I'm by myself, that means just heating up a can of chili and calling it good. But when Colin is along, I try to put a little more effort into it. I remembered this super basic and easy dish I would make when I was a college student and didn't really know how to cook, and it seemed perfect as a hot and satisfying one-pan meal. First, I'm just browning some ground beef. Now I'm going to put in some noodles. I pre-cooked these before the trip, so I wouldn't have to also boil a pot of water or drain the cooked pasta, blah blah blah. I also sauteed some mushrooms at home, and I just packed those in with the noodles. Now a can of basic Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, plus 1 can of water, creates a sauce that pulls it all together, and voila, quick and easy beef stroganoff, camping edition. So far, everything on this trip is going perfectly according to plan. We hit all our destinations today, found a great campsite, and had time to relax at the end of a long day. So I've gotten up with the rising sun as usual, taking some photos of the, trees and grass. But wow, is it cold. My fingers are painful as I try to operate the buttons and dials of my camera. I did check the forecast for this area and it was calling for lows around 34 degrees. That's chilly for sure, but didn't seem worrisome. I'm gonna just switch on the car and see what the temperature is. Ah, wow. Time for some coffee and breakfast. I built my little camp kitchen around this basic and inexpensive single-burner butane stove. I was previously using one of those single burners that screw onto the top of a propane canister, but that thing is so tall and top-heavy that it's really awkward to use. I absolutely love this little butane stove. It's super easy to install the butane canister, it ignites itself, and the flame control is much more precise than any propane camp stove I've ever used. It boils water surprisingly quickly. In fact, this is probably one of my favorite bits of camp gear, as it's both very affordable and works great. I'll put a link in the description. We've broken camp and are headed towards Crack in the Ground. We're on dirt roads that will take us back past Fort Rock, though we will have to do some driving on paved highway for a while. There are probably more direct routes to get over to Crack in the Ground, but we're going to swing wide down through the town of Christmas Valley and top up the gas tank again. Well, this is also much more interesting than I was expecting. You can see Colin down in there for a sense of scale. And we haven't even got to the deepest part yet. How cool is this? In every way, really. It's already getting hot and sunny outside, but it is frigid cold down here in the crack. This 2-mile-long fissure in the basalt reminds me of those Utah slot canyons, only a volcanic Oregon version. Like Hole in the Ground, you really need to see this in person. It's totally worth making the stop and short hike if you're ever anywhere near here. We're cruising along through day 2 and everything is going great. We've explored Crack in the Ground and are on our way to Derrick Cave. Here you can see how all of these interesting geological sites on our itinerary are relatively close, separated by swaths of desert, but forming a really logical loop. This is the leg of our trip we're on now, working our way northwest from Crack in the Ground towards Derrick Cave. I'm really glad we stopped at the ranger station yesterday and picked up a few more maps. By referring to the maps and cross-referencing with what we can see on the GPS, we're figuring out where we are and which way to go at each of these unmarked forks in the road. Or at least we think we are. We're mostly traversing BLM land today, those yellow areas on the map, and we have the right to drive these roads across these public lands.
Well, it's got a BLM number.
The white areas are private land, but they are crossed by BLM and county roads.
This road up here along the bottom of that lava bed, that's a county. Yeah, that's a county road. I don't see how that could be. I mean, it cuts across private land, but it's a county road. I don't see how we could not be able to drive across it. That's a county road. That's gotta be okay, right? That's gotta be okay. That's gotta be okay.
It's gotta be okay. Right?
Alright, so we're slogging across the desert now, and it's become clear by looking at the GPS that we are not on the road I thought we were on. Is it possible we've ventured onto private land? We're crossing paths with cattle and passing by corrals. The roads are increasingly iffy looking, and frankly we're getting a little nervous that we're going to stumble upon a grumpy rancher who's had it with pesky tourists on his property. This super friendly BLM officer has just confirmed that we are indeed still on BLM land and totally legit. But he does have some bad news for us. Our planned route to Derrick Cave, which looks entirely accessible on this map we purchased yesterday, has in fact been closed off right about here due to some public lands very recently getting bought up by a private party and roads gated off. Getting to Derrick Cave will now be a massive detour that is simply not worth it. But the super friendly BLM field officer has told us about an interesting drive across some lava beds, and we've decided to give that a go instead. So today is not going quite according to plan, but we're rolling with it and feeling good. We're driving through some beautiful and mostly unseen lands with the BLM's blessing. I'm thrilled we ran into that guy when we did, because we would have been in for an unhappy surprise and a lot of backtracking had we continued on our planned route. So we're out on BLM land, following the directions of a BLM field officer or whatever that we ran into, who informed us that we couldn't get to the cave we wanted to get to, but he told us about this road that he had just been driving down, gave us directions, told us how to get through the gate and turn here, turn there. Then he said we'd get to Jack's place, the watering hole. And so I was going along looking for, you know, a little bar or a pub or something called Jack's Place. But actually, this is Jack's Place. There's not even any water in the watering hole. Okay, so we are definitely on the road the BLM guy directed us to, but this really isn't quite what either Colin or I understood we would be seeing. Instead, we're just slowly trudging along this barely visible two-track that's so overgrown we've had to veer around actual trees growing literally in the middle of the road. According to the map, it's a dead end, so we realize we're going to have to come back out the same way, and It's just not showing any signs of becoming anything other than more sagebrush, juniper, and grass. We've paused here for lunch and to decide what to do next.
Definitely been driving through some dust here. It's like a measurable thickness.
Well, we've abandoned the supposed lava beds side trip and decided to head for Pine Mountain Observatory as a final point of interest stop. While it's not on any of the paper maps we have, we know it's not terribly far away to the northwest, and my GPS has plotted a route for us. Seems simple enough, or so we think. The route is increasingly failing to inspire confidence. The quote-unquote roads are getting difficult to discern. Sometimes what we're seeing on the GPS is not corresponding to what we're seeing on the ground. We've changed course a few times, had to improvise and force the GPS to recalculate, and we're growing a bit weary as the afternoon drags on. Creeping along this trail at about 2 miles per hour has got us both a bit on edge. We've got plenty of gasoline, water, and food, so we're not truly in any danger, but we are getting nervous we may need to backtrack for hours, which we really don't want to do. Okay, so honestly, I have no idea what kind of land we were on back there, but we found a gate that crossed into what is definitely national forest, and things are lining up again on the GPS. Pine Mountain wasn't originally part of our plan, but this road climbing up the south flank is absolutely stunning. We're tired and out of patience to film this properly, but if you ever decide to drive up to the observatory, skip the main road from Highway 20 and take this route instead. This scenic little segment of driving is totally lifting our spirits. Near the top of the mountain, you can park and walk around the multiple observatory buildings housing telescopes. Visits are even possible on some weekend nights. A brief hike further brings you up to the summit, where we found an elaborate pile of rocks. This reminds me of a tradition I learned about from watching Andrew St. Pierre White overlanding in Africa, and so we each place our contribution. This contemplative mountaintop moment, with an expansive view of numerous cascade peaks in the waning light of late afternoon, feels like a fitting conclusion to our little adventure. We're on our way back down the north side of Pine Mountain towards Highway 20, where we'll air up, point the car west, and head home. Thanks for watching. You can read write-ups and see photos from all my Oregon adventures at softroadingthewest.com. Follow Softroading the West on Instagram updated daily with submitted photos of soft-roading excursions across the West and beyond. You'll find links to these and other pages relevant to this excursion in the description below.